The desert wind howled a familiar lullaby against the reinforced glass of my isolated Arizona cabin, a stark contrast to the whispered judgments that had followed me my entire life. My hands calloused not from gardening but from years spent gripping joysticks in classified bunkers and tracing strategic lines on digital maps, felt steady as I brewed another cup of bitter black coffee. The early morning light, sharp and unforgiving, mirrored the clarity with which I now viewed my past, a past meticulously rewritten by my own blood. My name is Violet Thorne, and for most of my 32 years, I was the ghost in my family's grand narrative. They were the Thornes, a lineage synonymous with military valor and political prowess. My father, Senator Alistair Thorne, a man whose every utterance was a carefully crafted speech, embodied the family legacy. My younger sister, Scarlett, was the golden child, destined to inherit the mantle. And me? I was the quiet strategist, the one who worked in the shadows, whose achievements were either conveniently forgotten or subtly attributed elsewhere. Years ago, after graduating at the top of my class from the Naval Academy, a distinction my father barely acknowledged, I plunged into the clandestine world of military intelligence. While Scarlett pursued a more public-facing career in military communications, I was leading ghost operations, designing intricate defense protocols, and coordinating ground maneuvers from 1,000 miles away. My life was a series of high-stakes calculations, each success a quiet personal victory, unseen and uncelebrated by the very people whose approval I once craved. It was a choice, I told myself, a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. But the silence from my family always felt less like acceptance and more like deliberate erasure. The digital invitation arrived on a Tuesday, an elegant email with a Thorne family crest, announcing Scarlett's formal commendation ceremony at the historic West Point Military Academy. It was a national event, televised, celebrating Operation Crimson Dawn, a recent classified mission that had captivated headlines. My finger hovered over the delete button, a familiar weariness settling in my chest. I wasn't surprised my name wasn't on the official guest list, nor on the program that was already circulating among the elite. My mother, Eleanor, whose social calendar dictated her entire existence, had made sure of it. This was Scarlett's moment, carefully curated, perfectly polished, a testament to the Thorne dynasty's unwavering brilliance. But then a thought, sharp as a tactical blade, cut through the resignation. This wasn't just about Scarlett's moment. It was about my history, my contributions, systematically stripped away. Operation Crimson Dawn was my brainchild. I designed the infiltration routes, developed the communication jammers, and coordinated the drone swarms that turned the tide. Scarlett, with her public relations savvy, had been the face of the mission's field communications, but I had been its brain and beating heart. To see her lauded for my work, to be invisible at the very celebration of my own legacy, suddenly felt intolerable. My phone, a secure government-issued device, buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Rowe, my former commanding officer, a man who saw through the political theater. Violet, just saw the Crimson Dawn declassification notice. They've redacted critical sections. Your southern flank strategy is missing entirely. What they've released, it's a fiction. My breath hitched. The public version was a lie. I remembered the late nights, the near impossible calculations, the sheer terror of orchestrating a maneuver that saved hundreds of lives. They hadn't just omitted me. They had surgically removed my existence from the very fabric of the operation. The chill that ran down my spine wasn't just from the desert morning. It was the cold rage of betrayal. This wasn't oversight. It was calculated malice. I opened my secure archive, navigating through layers of encryption. The original Crimson Dawn files glowed on my screen. My operational maps, my coded call signs, my meticulous chain of command diagrams. Everything was there, precise and irrefutable. And then I saw it. A small, almost invisible note embedded deep in the admin logs. Amended for internal consistency per AT Directive 721. AT, Alistair Thorne, my father. My own blood had orchestrated my erasure from the official military record, replacing my name with Scarlett's, burying my contributions beneath a mountain of lies to elevate his favored child. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a calculated act of sabotage. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I downloaded the unaltered original, every log file, every edit note, every timestamp and IP address. They had rewritten history once. They wouldn't get the chance again. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not my mother, who would have dismissed it as melodrama. Not Scarlett, who would have feigned confusion. Not even my old unit. I wanted no comfort, no warnings. I just wanted to see for myself. The flight from Phoenix to New York felt endless, each mile burning off another layer of doubt. As I drove upstate towards West Point, the rolling hills and crisp autumn air offered little solace. I pulled into the visitor parking lot of the prestigious academy, its Gothic architecture and pristine grounds a stark symbol of tradition and unyielding power. I adjusted the hem of my charcoal suit. This wasn't my first time being stopped at the door. Years ago, I'd been denied access to a high-level defense policy summit in D.C. because I'd forgotten my rank badge. They'd assumed I was an intern. Today, I carried something more potent than a badge. The truth. The young cadet at the gate, barely out of basic training, scanned my military ID, then looked down at his tablet, his brow furrowing. "Violet Thorne?" he asked, tilting the screen towards me. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice steady. He tapped a few times. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name's not listed." I didn't flinch. "I received a formal invitation. This event is for Operation Crimson Dawn, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Active and honorary mentions." He hesitated. "Do you have a printed copy of the invite?" "No," I said flatly. It was hand-delivered from Eleanor Thorne. That made him straighten. Eleanor Thorne was not a name one dismissed lightly at West Point. "Wait here, please," he said, walking off to make a call. Cars pulled in behind me. Guests in tailored suits and flowing gowns stepping out. I watched a woman adjust her son's tie, while the father shook hands with another officer. Music drifted faintly from inside brass tuning up, soft chatter beneath it. Then I saw her. Eleanor walked past the gate in a midnight blue gown, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She glanced toward me and didn't break stride. No smile, no acknowledgement, just a flicker of her eyes like brushing dust from a sleeve. I could have called out. I didn't. Instead, I adjusted my cuffs and waited. The cadet returned, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said again. "Your name isn't authorized. I can't let you through without clearance." "You've seen my ID?" I pressed. "Yes, ma'am, but—" A voice, surprisingly strong for its age, rang from behind the gate. "She's with me." My grandmother, Clara Thorne, stood just inside the inner courtyard, a gnarled walking stick in one hand, her spine ramrod straight despite her 80-odd years. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her presence carried through the space like a drumbeat. "She's a Thorne," Clara declared, her voice resonating with an authority that silenced the buzzing conversations around us. "She belongs here." The guard turned to me, caught between protocol and instinct. I held his gaze. Finally, he stepped aside. I walked in. People turned as I passed, conversations pausing, then resuming in forced tones. My name moved in whispers like smoke across the hedges and white chairs. I recognized a few faces from Scarlett's Academy group, others from high society DC circles. None approached. One woman frowned at my plain suit. Another leaned toward her husband and murmured something with a glance in my direction. My heels tapped on the flagstone path, measured, deliberate, every step echoing louder than any shout I could offer. I crossed into the courtyard proper. 2 columns of ceremonial cadets flanked the aisle, sabers lifted in silent salute for the honorees due to walk through. I walked straight through it. I wasn't in the program, but I walked through that line of honor as if I'd been summoned, because I had led soldiers through worse. As I neared the main reception area, I saw Eleanor by the host podium, speaking to a coordinator. Her expression shifted when she saw me, lips pressed, eyes thin with disbelief. She stepped toward me quickly, her voice low. "You shouldn't be here," my mother whispered. I smiled. And yet, here I am. The screen flickered as the projector warmed up, washing the polished oak stage in a pale blue glow. The seal of the United States Army gave way to bold white text on black. Operation Crimson Dawn, Command Narrative. I sat near the back of the auditorium next to Clara in the row reserved for family. Only half the seats were filled. Most of the guests were down front. Senators, generals, Gold Star families. The atmosphere buzzed with rehearsed reverence. We were only an hour from the real thing, the televised ceremony where my sister would be exalted in front of the nation. But first came the run-through. Scarlett stood center stage in her tailored dress uniform, flanked by 2 aides and a communications tech. She cleared her throat, then began, "Good afternoon." 4 years ago, in the heat of northern Afghanistan's escalation, I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. Enemy drones circled above. Friendly comms were down, and every path forward led through chaos. Her voice carried clearly, measured and just the right amount of humble. I'd heard her practice this cadence before, back when we were teens, and she recited Model UN speeches in front of the bathroom mirror. Back when she still called me sis instead of that analyst who never makes an appearance. I opened my notebook. With limited personnel and no drone support, Scarlett continued, gesturing to a map appearing on the screen behind her. I coordinated our units into a pincer maneuver. This strategy, though risky, allowed us to reclaim Sector 7 and stabilize the corridor for evac. My hand clenched around the pen, but I didn't stop writing. I traced her phrases, each one carefully lifted from my own debriefings. I had said those exact words to Rowe, to General Harding, to the War College panel when they interviewed me post-deployment. I remembered sweating through that testimony, hands trembling, knowing I wouldn't be quoted, just recorded. Beside me, Clara leaned in and gently touched my wrist. Her hand was cool but steady, her thumb brushing against my pulse. She didn't speak, but I heard her loud and clear. "It's time." Scarlett continued narrating my work like she'd invented it. She wasn't improvising. She had rehearsed this over and over until it sounded lived, real, her own. The screen shifted again. Now came the tactical overlays, the visual spine of the operation. Color-coded paths, terrain shifts, infrared patterns. I knew them by heart. I had spent nights curled over these same graphics, coordinating unit locations with air support, triangulating blind spots no algorithm could solve. Except now, in bold, at the top of the slide, Mission Design, Captain Scarlett Thorne. The font was small but unmistakable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I heard it. The shift. The first murmurs from the front rows. A general leaning toward his aide, a pair of journalists tapping frantically on their tablets, a Navy Rear Admiral squinting at the screen, then back at her briefing folder. Scarlett faltered, just for a second. She glanced back at the screen, eyes narrowing, a tiny crack in her mask. But she kept going. Through careful coordination and adaptive maneuvering, the second slide appeared. Final field authorization. V. Thorne. The audience noise swelled, polite confusion curdling into curiosity. Someone behind me whispered, "Wasn't she intel?" Then came the voice that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Harding said, rising from his seat and approaching the microphone, "allow me to correct the record." He paused, letting the sentence land like a hammer on marble. Scarlett froze, mid-sentence. Harding nodded toward the screen, calm and composed. The tactical brilliance of Operation Crimson Dawn has long been credited to the officers in the field. But the true architect of that mission is sitting among us today. I didn't have to say a word. The document spoke louder than Scarlett ever had. The room behind the stage was no longer just a green room. It was a battlefield. Officers in dress uniform huddled in knots, murmuring over tablets and briefing folders. Screens replayed the last slides of the ceremony on loop. Harding's voice echoed faintly from a recording. The true architect, sitting among us today. I stood against the far wall near the windows, silent, observing, letting gravity do its work. Scarlett sat slumped in a leather-backed chair, jaw clenched, eyes flicking between the display and the polished floor. Eleanor hovered nearby, fuming in controlled outrage. She'd been whispering furiously to Scarlett for the last 10 minutes, but Scarlett hadn't responded. Rose stepped beside me, handing me a copy of the official operation dossier, declassified 5 hours ago. Posted to internal command archives. Full attribution restored. Metadata included. I took it without a word. He hesitated, then added, "They're already quoting it in the briefing room. Joint Command is convening a panel Monday." The room's shifting fast. From the opposite side, Harding approached. Calm, measured, a clipboard in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. "You've got admirers," he said with a faint smile. "And some very nervous old brass in DC." Then, as if on cue, a massive screen behind the stage flickered to life again, this time broadcasting directly to the media chamber just off the hall. A scanned copy of the original Crimson Dawn battle strategy glowed blue against white, complete with timestamp and signature at the bottom, in clean-typed clarity. Lead Command, Brigadier General Violet Thorne. Approved by Joint Operational Command, Pacific Theater. A hush fell over the room. Even the murmurs died. Eleanor hissed through her teeth. That file was never meant to be public. Scarlett looked like she might say something, but her throat visibly tightened. For a woman so comfortable at the podium, she suddenly seemed allergic to air. Then Harding stepped forward again, his voice calm, deliberate. To those wondering about accuracy, let me be very clear. This document was reviewed by the Office of Inspector General and the Department of Strategic Ethics. It is authentic. It reflects not only battlefield decisions, but the chain of command as it truly existed. He turned toward the room's press officers. Effective immediately, the record will reflect Brigadier General Violet Thorne as commanding strategist of Operation Crimson Dawn. No clapping, no gasps, just stillness. The kind that breaks people. Scarlett finally stood. "Sir, I wasn't aware there was a mix-up. I thought," she gestured vaguely, "that it was a clerical oversight. I never asked for my name on the command file. Someone else must have Stop," Harding said quietly. "Your name didn't appear accidentally, and the record of edits, some of which were routed through your father's private server, suggests otherwise." Scarlett opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. From the rear of the room, I felt Clara's gaze settle on me, steady as ever. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I looked into the cameras pointed at me now, full cruise, silent, lenses trained for a soundbite that would never come. I held the gaze. Let them wonder what it felt like. Let the silence settle, like judgment. Harding unrolled a final sheet of paper. Additionally, he said, "The following is now entered into the public record. Service citations for Unit Kilo 7 under General Thorne's direction. Each of these soldiers filed direct testimony, attributing their survival to decisions made on the ground by her command." He read 10 names. 11. 12. Each one another nail in the myth of Scarlett Thorne, Commander. Scarlett stood frozen, shoulders tightening. Her fingers fidgeted at the lapel of her jacket, where 2 rows of pins shone like hollow promises. Then came the hand on her shoulder. A tall, clean-shaven officer in dark navy leaned in and said low but audible, "Your promotion's under review." They erased me from the guest list, so I let them announce me on national television. The stage lights washed the room in a gold so brilliant it felt unreal, like something from a stage drama, not a military recognition ceremony. Cameras were locked onto the podium. Microphones gleamed across the rows of polished seats. Hundreds of officers, veterans, and family members turned towards the man standing confidently at center stage. General Harding cleared his throat. The audience, still humming with whispers from the earlier revelations, fell completely silent. He adjusted his glasses, then looked straight into the front row. "Before we close tonight's ceremony," he began, "there is one more name we must recognize." I exhaled once, deep. Clara gently placed her gloved hand over mine for just a second, then released. Harding's voice rang out, crisp and unwavering. For too long, credit was misplaced, honor was misdirected, and a soldier who exemplified intelligence, courage, and command was deliberately left out of her own legacy. Today, we correct that. He turned, facing the cameras directly. "Please stand with me," he said, as we officially welcome back to our roles General Violet Thorne. The sound that followed wasn't applause at first. It was chairs scraping back, dozens of them, then hundreds. The entire room stood, except two. Scarlett remained seated, eyes forward, expression unreadable, and beside her, Eleanor, arms folded tightly, lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. They didn't move, but I did. Slowly, I rose. My dress uniform caught the light, the ribbons and bars in perfect alignment. It was the first time I'd worn the full set in public. Until now, I'd kept it folded in a garment bag, hidden in the back of my closet, like a relic of someone I used to be. But tonight, I wore every piece, every inch of earned weight. The aisle cleared ahead of me as I walked toward the stage. Phones rose in silence. Flashes popped. The cameras were live, beaming my face into homes, offices, outposts around the world. No one tried to stop me this time. Harding met me at the edge of the stage and extended his hand. I took it. Behind him, the screen now bore my name. Centered, bold, and unqualified. Brigadier General Violet Thorne, Command Strategist, Operation Crimson Dawn. For one breathless moment, the room was utterly still. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. It wasn't performative. It wasn't polite. It was recognition. A young woman in uniform, maybe 24 at most, stood near the side rows. She had tears on her cheeks, hands clasped at her chest. When she caught my eye, she whispered something I still heard through the chaos. "She's the reason I stayed." My throat tightened. I turned toward the microphone but didn't speak. I let the weight of the moment settle. I looked past the stage, through the camera lenses, toward the people I couldn't see, the soldiers, the analysts, the quiet ones like me who worked tirelessly, often in the shadows. For years, I believed that choosing myself, choosing my own path, meant failure in the eyes of my family. I thought love had to hurt, that validation came from their fleeting approval. But standing there, under the relentless gaze of 1,000 cameras, my name finally etched in public record. I knew the truth. Choosing myself, reclaiming my narrative, was the most radical act of love I had ever done. Not just for me, but for every hidden hero, every unsung strategist, every woman who grew up believing her worth was dictated by others. My name is Violet Thorne, and my story, once erased, now echoes through history, a testament to unwavering courage in the face of injustice. Remember, some legacies are inherited, but the ones forged through pain and principle last longer. When injustice is met with quiet defiance and relentless truth, no lie survives the spotlight forever. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, washing over me, shaking the very foundations of the hall. It wasn't just West Point. It was the entire military establishment, the nation watching, a collective gasp turning into a thunderous ovation. My name, Violet Thorne, echoed from the speakers, ricocheting off the vaulted ceilings. It felt surreal, like an out-of-body experience. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every quiet tear I'd shed in the privacy of my Arizona cabin, now evaporated in this single, undeniable moment of public validation. I met General Harding's gaze. His stern features had softened, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of the battle won. He knew the cost of this moment for me, and for him, for daring to defy the Thorne family's unspoken decree. This wasn't just about my personal vindication. It was about the integrity of the institution, about ensuring that true merit, not political maneuvering, defined its heroes. My eyes swept across the faces in the audience. Most were a blur of shocked expressions and burgeoning respect. Then, my gaze landed on the front row. Eleanor, my mother, looked as though she'd swallowed a lemon. Her face, usually so meticulously composed, was a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled fury. She began to rise, then caught herself, sinking back into her seat as if held down by an invisible weight. Beside her, Scarlett, my sister, seemed to have shrunk. Her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the polished floor, refusing to meet mine. The golden child, now tarnished, exposed. A small, triumphant smile touched my lips, not of malice, but of quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The truth, like a persistent predator, had finally found its prey. The events of that night, though outwardly swift, had been years in the making. A culmination of calculated silences and relentless work in the shadows. To understand the full weight of that moment on stage, one had to understand the intricate, suffocating web of the Thorne family. Our father, Senator Alistair Thorne, was a man who lived by optics. Every word, every gesture, every family photo op was meticulously planned to project an image of unparalleled success, unwavering patriotism, and impeccable lineage. He had served in the military briefly, enough to garner some early respect, before pivoting to law and then politics, where his true genius for manipulation shone. He believed that the world was a chessboard, and every person in his life was a pawn, or at best, a rook. Scarlett, from a young age, was his queen. Beautiful, charismatic, effortlessly charming, she embodied the public face of the Thorne legacy. She excelled in all the right places. The prestigious equestrian club, the debate team, eventually the public relations arm of the military, where her talent for crafting narratives found its perfect home. She was a natural performer, skilled at reading a room and delivering exactly what was expected. I, on the other hand, was always the anomaly. Quiet, analytical, preferring books to parties, tactical simulations to social gatherings. My father saw my intellect, yes, but only as a tool to be leveraged, never as something to be celebrated for its own sake. When I announced my intention to join the Naval Academy, he approved, seeing it as another branch of the family tree to cultivate, another line on his resume. But my true passion, the complex abstract world of intelligence and strategy, was lost on him. It lacked the glamour, the public acclaim. It was, in his words, too much thinking, not enough doing for the cameras. My relationship with Scarlett was a slow, painful erosion. As children, there was a fragile bond built on shared secrets and sisterly confidences. But as we grew, a subtle competition, fueled by our parents' differing expectations, began to poison the well. My quiet achievements were always overshadowed by Scarlett's dazzling public victories. If I aced a calculus exam, Scarlett won the regional debate championship. If I developed a new coding sequence, Scarlett landed an internship with a prominent senator. It wasn't always malicious on her part. Not at first. But the constant praise, the spotlight, the easy adoration from our parents, especially our father, gradually instilled in her a belief that she was inherently superior, that my contributions were somehow lesser, less real. "Oh, Violet," she'd once sighed, casually dismissing my detailed plans for a complex cybersecurity drill during a family dinner. "You always think so much. Sometimes you just need to act. People respond to action, not all these complicated charts." My father had nodded in agreement, reinforcing the narrative that my strategic mind was a flaw, not a strength. My mother, Eleanor, was a different kind of enabler. Her world revolved around appearances, social standing, and maintaining the flawless facade of the Thorne family. Any deviation, any hint of controversy or imperfection, was to be swiftly eradicated. My choice to pursue a deeply classified career, to disappear into the labyrinthine world of intelligence, suited her perfectly. It kept me out of sight, out of mind, and spared her the effort of explaining my unconventional path to her society friends. She saw my successes as inconvenient truths that might upset the delicate balance of the family's public image, especially when Scarlett's star began to rise in the military's public affairs realm. "Darling," she'd once told me, her voice laced with honeyed poison, "your work is so cerebral, so important, I'm sure. But Scarlett," She has such a presence. People are drawn to her. That's what truly matters in this world, isn't it? Connections. Influence. Her words were a constant reminder that my value lay not in my abilities, but in my ability to remain unseen. Only my grandmother, Clara, saw through the charade. A formidable woman who had served as a nurse in Vietnam, she understood sacrifice, duty, and quiet resilience. She was the family's silent observer, her piercing blue eyes missing nothing. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words were delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. She never offered false platitudes, never pressured me to conform. Instead, she offered quiet nods of understanding, a hand squeeze when my parents' dismissiveness became unbearable, and a knowing look that said, "I see you." She was my anchor, the one person who implicitly understood that my strength lay not in seeking validation, but in mastering the complex world that others couldn't comprehend. Operation Crimson Dawn had been the crucible. It began 4 years ago. A volatile, rapidly deteriorating situation in northern Afghanistan. A critical supply route, vital for humanitarian aid and military reinforcement, had been compromised. A rogue insurgent group, employing highly sophisticated drone technology and an uncanny ability to jam conventional communications, had effectively cut off a significant contingent of coalition forces, leaving them vulnerable and isolated. The previous command had faltered, unable to adapt to the unconventional tactics. Lives were literally hanging in the balance. I was brought in discreetly, a lone analyst in a heavily guarded, windowless bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. My reputation preceded me, a ghost in the machine, a mind that could untangle knots no one else could even see. My directive was simple: devise a strategy to reclaim the supply route, neutralize the drone threat, and restore communications, all with minimal casualties. It was a suicide mission on paper. For weeks, I lived and breathed Crimson Dawn. My days blurred into nights. I pored over satellite imagery, analyzed enemy comms patterns, deciphered their encryption protocols. I slept on a cot in the bunker, sustained by lukewarm coffee and the adrenaline that coursed through my veins. The air crackled with tension, the fate of hundreds weighing on my shoulders. My screens glowed with topographical maps, heat signatures, and real-time intelligence feeds. I began to see patterns, subtle shifts in their drone movements, faint echoes in their jammed frequencies that hinted at a central control node. The solution came to me in a flash, during a particularly grueling 36-hour stint. It was a daring, almost insane plan. A coordinated pincer maneuver, not with ground troops, but with a swarm of modified, stealth microdrones, each carrying a high-frequency jammer. The goal was to create a ghost corridor, a brief, undetectable window where our ground forces could move through the enemy's controlled territory, while their sophisticated tech was momentarily blinded and deafened. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that relied on perfect timing, flawless execution, and a deep understanding of the enemy's psychological profile. My superiors, initially skeptical, were eventually swayed by the meticulous detail of my plan, the cold, hard logic of my calculations. Rowe, then my immediate superior, had fought tooth and nail to get it approved, arguing vehemently against the old guard's reluctance to embrace unconventional warfare. "She sees what we can't, sir," he'd told General Harding during one heated briefing. "Give her the reins." And they did. For the next 72 hours, I was the unseen conductor of a deadly symphony. From my bunker, I coordinated every element: the precise launch of the microdrones, the timing of the electronic countermeasures, the synchronized movement of our ground units. The tension was suffocating. Every flicker on the screen, every crackle in the comms, sent a jolt through me. There were moments of pure terror. A drone going offline too early, a ground unit encountering unexpected resistance. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady, my mind sharp, making split-second adjustments, rerouting, recalibrating. Scarlett, meanwhile, was in the field 1,000 miles away, serving as a communications officer with a forward unit. Her role was critical, but it was to relay my instructions, to ensure my commands were accurately disseminated to the ground troops. She was the voice, but I was the brain. She executed, I strategized. The mission was a resounding success. The ghost corridor held, the supply route was secured, casualties were minimal, and the insurgent group's command and control capabilities were crippled. It was hailed as a tactical masterpiece, a paradigm shift in modern warfare. But when the dust settled, when the official reports were drafted, my name, the architect of that triumph, began to disappear. First, it was subtle. The brilliant coordination of ground and air assets, the preliminary reports would state, omitting the who behind the coordination. Then, the decisive action of field command, subtly shifting the credit to those on the ground. Then came the official version, carefully crafted by public affairs, where Captain Scarlet Thorne's brave leadership and on-the-ground strategic vision became the driving force behind Crimson Dawn. My detailed diagrams, my strategic overlays, my meticulous operational logs, all were attributed to various command elements or, more egregiously, relabeled with Scarlet's name as the primary designer. I fought it quietly at first. I confronted Roe, who was equally outraged but politically constrained. "They've got a narrative, Violet," he'd warned me, "and your father is pushing it. He wants a hero for the cameras, not a ghost in the machine." I had even attempted to speak to my father, only to be met with his patented, condescending smile. "Violet, darling," he'd said, putting a hand on my shoulder, "you're too modest. Your contributions are invaluable, of course, but some roles are more visible. Scarlet is simply more suited to that. It's for the good of the family, dear." The Thorne name. The sting of those words cut deeper than any physical wound. It wasn't just about credit. It was about my very identity, my professional existence, being erased by my own family for their dynastic ambitions. It was then that I retreated, withdrawing from the public eye, taking the isolated post in Arizona, pouring my energy into new, even more obscure projects, and nursing a quiet, simmering resentment. I believed then that if they didn't want to see me, I would simply disappear. I didn't realize that in disappearing, I allowed their lie to solidify. The West Point ceremony was supposed to be the final nail in my coffin, the undisputed coronation of Scarlet Thorne as the military's golden girl. But I had arrived armed with something more powerful than their carefully constructed narrative, irrefutable proof. As Harding had spoken, the flash of my name on the screen had been a seismic shock. Now, as I stood on stage, the applause still ringing in my ears, I could see the chaos unfolding in the wings and hear the frantic whispers of the event organizers. The official program, now a crumpled, obsolete piece of paper in many hands, was being frantically consulted. I saw a group of military journalists, their faces a mixture of confusion and predatory excitement, scrambling to connect their laptops to the hall's Wi-Fi, undoubtedly searching for Brigadier General Violet Thorne. The sudden declassification of the true Crimson Dawn files, timed perfectly by Roe and Harding, was about to hit the public like a tactical strike. My gaze drifted back to Scarlet. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Eleanor was gripping her arm, whispering fiercely, her words lost in the rising din of the crowd. Senator Thorne, my father, stood a few rows back, a formidable figure who usually commanded every room he entered. But tonight, he was just a man, his composure cracking under the weight of an unexpected truth. His eyes met mine across the hall, and for the first time I saw not contempt, but a flicker of genuine fear. The mask had slipped. His carefully constructed world was crumbling. The flashbulbs intensified. Reporters were shouting questions, their voices barely audible above the applause. "General Thorne, a comment? What about the earlier reports? Senator Thorne, did you know about this?" I remained silent, letting the chaos swirl around me. My grandmother Clara now stood beaming in the front row, a quiet dignity about her. She had seen countless battles, both on the field and within the family, This, I knew, was her victory too. She had always believed in the unseen, the understated power of truth. General Harding stepped forward, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. His voice, now amplified by the microphone, carried immense authority. Ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Defense will issue a formal statement regarding these revelations tomorrow morning. For now, let us simply honor those who truly serve. He gestured toward me, and the applause swelled once more. I took a deep breath, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers filling my lungs. This wasn't the end, merely the beginning of a long, difficult process. There would be investigations, inquiries, media storms. My life, once cloaked in shadow, was now brutally exposed to the harsh glare of public scrutiny. But I was ready. I was no longer the quiet analyst, the ghost. I was General Violet Thorne, and I would not be silenced again. As I descended the stage, the cadets formed a spontaneous honor guard, their sabers still raised. My hand instinctively went to my chest, touching the familiar weight of my rank insignia. It was real. I was real. I was here. The aftermath was, as predicted, a firestorm. The morning news cycle was dominated by the West Point revelation. My name, once buried, was plastered across every major news outlet. Mystery General unmasked. The true architect of Crimson Dawn, screamed one headline. Thorne family scandal. Senator accused of cover-up, blared another. The carefully curated narrative of Scarlett Thorne's heroism imploded spectacularly, replaced by a torrent of questions about the integrity of military commendations and political influence. The Department of Defense, caught off guard but swiftly moving to control the narrative, announced a full internal investigation into the irregularities surrounding Operation Crimson Dawn's official reporting. Senator Thorne issued a terse statement denying any wrongdoing, attributing the discrepancy to clerical errors and miscommunication. No one believed him. The leaked metadata, showing his private server's IP address linked to the document edits, made his denials hollow. My phone, once a silent sentinel in my quiet life, now buzzed incessantly. Rowe called first, his voice crackling with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You broke the damn internet, Violet," he chuckled. "Harding's getting a commendation for standing up. And your father? He's being called to testify before the Senate Ethics Committee." I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. What about Scarlett? Her promotion is officially frozen, and her role in public affairs is under review. She's being reassigned, for now. A polite euphemism for being sidelined, stripped of her influence. The golden child, now relegated to the shadows she so readily cast me into. Eleanor, predictably, tried to reach me through Clara. My grandmother, ever my gatekeeper, simply forwarded a text message. It was long, rambling, full of thinly veiled accusations and self-pity. "Violet, how could you do this to your own sister? To our family? You've ruined everything!" There was no apology, no acknowledgement of her part in my erasure. Only the familiar refrain of how I had wronged them. I deleted it without a reply. There was nothing left to say to her. The next few days were a whirlwind of official briefings, interviews with military investigators, and carefully managed press conferences. I spoke with a quiet authority, presenting the facts, laying out the timeline, letting the documents speak for themselves. I didn't grandstand, didn't revel in the downfall of my family. My focus remained on the integrity of the military, the truth for the soldiers whose lives had been on the line, and the principle that merit, not connections, should define valor. During one particularly intense session with the Senate Armed Services Committee panel, a junior senator, young and earnest, looked at me with genuine admiration. "General Thorne," she asked, "why did you wait so long to reveal this?" I paused. Considering my answer carefully, because I believed in the system, I said, my voice steady. I believed that eventually the truth would find its way out. And I also believed that my work, my contributions, would speak for themselves without the need for public fanfare. I was wrong about the latter, but I never lost faith in the former. It was a partial truth, The other part was the lingering loyalty. The foolish hope that my family would eventually see my worth, that I could earn their love through silent sacrifice. That hope had died on that stage. My life began to change, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. The isolated cabin in Arizona became a hub of activity. Visitors arrived, not family, but former colleagues, high-ranking officers, even a few of the soldiers from Unit Kilo 7, the men and women whose lives I had indirectly saved. They came not for a show, but for quiet conversations, offering thanks, sharing their own stories of unseen contributions and bureaucratic frustrations. Their gratitude was more valuable than any commendation. One afternoon, Roe visited, bringing with him a stack of new assignments, each one more challenging, more critical than the last. "The Pentagon wants you back in the fold, Violet," he said, a grin stretching across his face, in a very visible capacity. "They need someone who understands the future of warfare, someone who isn't afraid to challenge the old ways. And frankly, they need a hero who earned it." I looked out at the vast desert landscape, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple. "I'm not a hero, Ro," I said softly. "I'm just a strategist who refused to be erased." He nodded. "And that's exactly why you are. That's the kind of hero we need." I accepted the new role, a senior position within the Department of Defense, tasked with overseeing strategic innovation and combating the very forms of information warfare that had almost consumed my own story. It was a daunting challenge, but one I was uniquely qualified for. Months later, the dust began to settle. Senator Thorne's political career, once seemingly unassailable, was in tatters. The ethics investigation had uncovered not just the tampering with my military records, but a pattern of using his influence to elevate Scarlett and sideline anyone who threatened her manufactured image. He resigned from the Senate, citing health reasons, a thinly veiled retreat from public humiliation. Scarlett, stripped of her rank and influence, eventually left the military. I heard through the grapevine that she was working for a private security firm, a shadow of her former self, largely ignored by the society circles that once adored her. The gilded cage of the Thorne dynasty had finally crumbled, trapping those who had built it. My relationship with my grandmother, Clara, deepened. She often visited my new office in D.C., a comfortable, uncluttered space with a panoramic view of the Potomac. We would sit, sipping tea, talking little, but understanding much. She was proud, not of the public acclaim, but of the inner strength I had found. "Blood isn't who bears you," she said one afternoon, her voice raspy with age but firm with conviction. "It's who bears truth with you." Her words resonated deep within me. She was family, truly. One day, I received an unexpected package. It was an old photo album, filled with faded pictures from my childhood. I flipped through the pages, seeing images I hadn't seen in years. A clumsy, toothy grin as a toddler. My first awkward salute in a too-big uniform. A rare photo of Scarlett and me, genuinely laughing, arms around each other before the weight of expectation separated us. At the very end, tucked into the last page, was a handwritten note from Scarlett. It was short, uncharacteristically devoid of pretense. "Violet," it read, "I saw the news. I saw what you did. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I hope one day, maybe, we can talk." I stared at the note for a long time. The apology wasn't a full absolution, not yet. But it was a start, a crack in the wall. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible or even desirable. But the rage, the bitterness, the deep-seated pain that had festered for years finally began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. My name is Violet Thorne. I am Brigadier General Violet Thorne, and my story is no longer dictated by others. It is my own. For years, I thought choosing myself, carving my own path, meant failure in the eyes of my family. I thought love had to hurt, that validation came from their fleeting, conditional approval. But standing on that stage, under the relentless gaze of 1,000 cameras, my name finally etched in public record, I knew the truth. Choosing myself, reclaiming my narrative, was the most radical act of love I had ever done. Not just for me, but for every hidden hero, every unsung strategist, every woman who grew up believing her worth was dictated by others. My story, once erased, now echoes through history, a testament to unwavering courage in the face of injustice. Remember, some legacies are inherited, but the ones forged through pain and principle last longer. When injustice is met with quiet defiance and relentless truth, no lie survives the spotlight forever.